What's up, guys? So in this video, I'm going to be going over volume and how I use it in my trading, as well as how you can use it in your trading to increase your win percentage, how to use it as a confirmation with your current strategy. So let's go ahead, dive right into it. So the one thing about volume that I do want to mention is the way that I use volume. I do look at volume profile a little bit, not a lot, market profile as well. But when it comes to volume, I really just look at the volume bars here. So just the standard volume indicator you have on pretty much any chart you can get. I don't use, VWAP. I don't use anything else like that. All I do is look at the volume bars here. That's really all you need. Now, when it comes to the volume bars down here, again, I don't actually look at exactly like the amount of volume in each candle. I do is I look at how much volume is relative to the previous volume and how that impacts price. So I'm going to go ahead, dive in, show you a few examples as well. But before we get into that, the key thing that comes to with volume is high volume, okay? When you see low volume, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which direction price is going. It doesn't matter if the volume bar is green or red. It does not matter. What does matter is the price and how much volume there is relative to that volume. Okay, so let's go ahead and break it down. We only want to look for high volume areas, okay? Again, low volume doesn't mean anything. High volume is typically, not always, and I'm going to show you how to confirm later in this video, but high volume typically equals reversals. Okay, so let me draw that out here. High volume typically equals reversals, okay? So let's go ahead and pull up SPY on a weekly chart here. And it works on all time frames, so I'm going to go over a bunch of different examples on all different time frames. So make sure you stay tuned to the end of the video to see all of that. But before we get into that, let's look at the SPY on the weekly chart, right? If I pull out the drawing tool here, you can see that we have this high volume node here. That ends up being the direct bottom of SPY, right? So let me draw that out like so. See if I zoom in a little bit. We see all this high volume as price comes down and we bottom at this 220 area. We end up going all the way high. This is the top and the bottom of the COVID crash, okay? Now, if I continue drawing out, if we look at this volume spike here, right, you can see this volume spike ends up around a price of 54. I'm just using relative to the price on SPY. If we look back, we never had any volume that high up until this day here. And this was years previously, right? So we obviously can see that there is high volume relative to the previous price action. That to me is an indication that there could be a potential reversal. If I draw this out, we can see that ends up being the bottom of the year of around 2018. And we end up going all the way up to 334 after that, right? I can keep it going as well. Even here, you see this huge volume spike, much bigger than everything else on the chart over the past few years. If I draw that out, draw it to that low there, we can see if I zoom in that was the bottom, right? We came up, pulled back, never broke that low, and ended up going all the way back to the all-time high break at 286, right? So when it comes to volume, guys, high volume is typically going to be a sign of reversals. Now let me go over some examples and then show you how to use confirmation with your strategy inside of that. So let's go ahead and look at TTD on the hourly chart here. So if I look at TTD, now the one thing also I want to mention before we get into this is that with stocks, at the market open and at the market close, there's always going to be high volume, always, because that's when the most volume occurs, right at the close and then right at the open. So I don't necessarily take that into account in my trading because I do know there's always going to be high volume there. So I want to look at relative to the previous weeks or days price action if I'm trading on a multi-day time frame. If I'm doing smaller time frame, then you want to look at the current day's volume, and I'll go ahead and dive into that in a second. But for now, let's go ahead and look at TTD. You can see here this huge volume spike on Thursday, and if we look at the past volume action, it's hovering around this, we'll say $29 area, anywhere to 30 down to like 27. We see this one all the way up at 35. Again, this 36 does not mean how much volume occurred. It's just using relative to price as an example, but you can see there's so much volume on this one candle here compared to everywhere else. And if we look and we draw this out all the way to where that was in price, it ended up being the high here. And we saw that high and reversed all the way down back to $48 from 58, right? Very, very clear example of, you can see how high volume indicates a reversal. If I go back even further, you can see right here, you can see this volume spike here, compared to the previous, let's say, past 2 weeks, it has the most amount of volume. You can see there's a clear indication of high volume right here, right? So when we see that, we also see it tap into the supply zone here. that's a good indication that price is going to reverse, and it does end up being the high. Now I know you're saying, Jordan, well, what about this one here and this one here, and we don't see any reversal there. I'm going to explain that in a second, but let's go ahead and look at a few other examples right now. Boeing, let's go on a smaller time frame as well. Let's go on the 5-minute, right? It might have been the 15-minute. Yeah, 15-minute. You can see Boeing as well. Aside from earnings, which of course is always going to have a high volume, if you look at the past, essentially the past month, this day we have this huge volume spike right here compared to any other volume spikes in the past month, right? So here we know, okay, there's a high volume spike here. If we zoom out, draw out exactly where that ends up being, we can see that it ends up being a high, short-term high. We end up coming down, pulling back, and might go lower after that. Maybe not. We shall see. But overall, I'm going to show you one last example on ES and then go into the confirmation side of volume. So let me go ahead on the 5-minute chart here. You can see here on this day, this is another example. So you can see obviously volume at the beginning is always going to start out high. Even right here, 10 o'clock, we had this huge volume spike compared to the past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 5-minute candles. And if I go ahead and draw that out, ends up being a short-term bottom there, right? And then this is another one I have as well. So throughout the day, volume ends up fading lower. We see, a little bit lower volume. Then right here, we see this volume spike as well. It's not that high compared to the previous volume, but we do see that increase in volume there. If I zoom out and draw this out, we can see it does end up being a short-term high, right at the high at this resistance area as well at 4,100. So we do get that increased volume at that resistance area, and we do end up fading and end up breaking it later. But we do get that short-term reversal, as you can see there. Okay, so now how do we confirm that this actually works, right? Because we saw that example on Boeing where we saw that increased volume. If I zoom out here, what about here? What about here? There's a bunch of different examples where we do see increased volume, but it doesn't result in a reversal. So the way you get around that is by waiting for the next candle confirmation, okay? So all you have to do is just wait for the next candle and see what happens, right? In this example here, you can see right here we have this increased volume. The next candle we immediately reverse. So once you see the next candle, you wait to see what happens. If you see that immediate reversal, then you know, okay, we're probably going to reverse down a little bit and continue moving forward, right? We see 5 more candles of continuous price action lower, and that means we end up going lower after that as well, right? When you may see something like this, right? So if price ends up going up, we'd say high volume spike right here, and then price just ends up going right past it, right through it, right? That can obviously happen, right? There is no guarantee that high volume is going to indicate a reversal, right? When you see this happen, then I simply just don't take the trade, right? I don't look at volume. I don't use it in terms of, confirmation with my strategy if it does not go in line with my overall strategy, right? So if price just keeps going up, we have that high volume and it does not reverse, I simply just don't look at it. So the way to confirm is simply just look at the next few candles, say like, okay, it's exactly just looking at price, right? Does price continue moving lower or does it stay above, right? That's going to give you a lot more confirmation in terms of learning with volume and your strategy. Now, guys, the one last thing that I want to add as well is that volume by itself is not good as its own strategy, okay? I always use volume as a confirmation, right? So that means I always have a higher time frame or a higher context strategy in play. Could be supply demand, could be balance theory, could be anything you guys are trading. But I always have that higher context strategy in play. And I use volume as a confirmation. So let's say, for example, I'm looking to get long down at this demand zone, right? Price comes down. And let's see, one thing that I could use for my confirmation is, okay, I don't want to get in right as price hits demand, but what I can do is wait and see, okay, do we have that confirmation with volume? Let's say price right here, we come to this demand, we see a lot of increased volume, right? Huge volume coming in, and then we see it turning back up, right? We see the next few candles crawling back up out of this demand zone. That gives me a lot more confirmation that I can get in long, put my stop in place, and then target all the way up here towards this supply, right? So volume is something that you want to use in conjunction or in confluence with your strategy. You never want to use it alone as simply just a strategy by itself. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below of other videos you want me to see. Also leave a like if you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you all in the next video.